Go.
Yep.
Welcome to Holly and Martin's podcast from English Electric Motorcycles in Redgrave, and we're here with Peter Frost. Hello, Peter.
Hello. Good. Thanks for having me.
Hello, Holly.
Hello.
It's slightly different today. We're going to be, instead of doing this online, we're going to be recording the interview as we drive along in Peter's very futuristic car, and that's a Tesla. Which model is it, Peter?
It's a Model 3, but it's the long-range versions.
It's very nice, isn't it, Holly?
Yeah, it's lovely.
Excellent.
Right, we're good to go?
Yeah.
Yep, let's go.
So Peter, the prices of electric bikes and cars, up front, they do look quite expensive. Over a lifetime of owning an electric vehicle, how do they compare to normal vehicles?
Well, what you have to look at is not just the initial purchase cost.
Yeah.
The way you have to look at it is the whole life cost, because with an internal combustion engine, yes, they're cheaper to buy, but while you're owning it, you're spending a lot more on fuel for it for a start.
Yeah.
You're also paying for servicing and tax and various other things that you don't face those similar costs with an electric vehicle. I can give you an example. Someone I knew paid for a service, and they had a cam belt kit change, and they had the fuel filter, the oil filter, the oil change, the spark plugs, all of those things an electric vehicle doesn't have.
Yeah.
And the brake pads themselves last at least 3 times longer in an electric car, because when you're slowing down, you're not necessarily using the brake pads. You're actually recharging the battery using a thing called regenerative braking, which is putting power and more range back into your battery. So it's capturing the momentum of the car in a constructive way and giving you more range.
And you mentioned recently that you've actually sold your own electric vehicles privately. What's the kind of resale value like?
Well, at the moment, the resale value is very good because a lot of people are cottoning on. Over the years, I've seen it completely change round. So to start with, people were a little bit uncertain about electric cars. Now it's completely gone the other way, that people are desperately wanting to get into electric vehicles, which means that demand is outstripping supply. So at the moment, the second-hand prices are very high, or they are higher than maybe they would be otherwise. And it only looks like it's going to get more so. So if you are thinking of making the change, it's worthwhile moving sooner rather than later, because that price differential is only going to increase probably. It's a good time to buy now, because you'll be sooner that you're getting the advantages of the lower running costs that I just mentioned. Okay.
Yeah.
Are you ready?
Yeah. Wow.
That was 60.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, quite impressive.
It
Feels like you're on a roller coaster.
Does using the performance make a big difference to the range, Peter?
It does. I've only recently got this, so I'm still driving it in a very spirited way. So the maximum theoretical range on it is 360, but I'm getting about 340 out of it at the moment. So it will, as I settle down with it, it'll improve. So, but it is lovely. It always puts a smile on your face when you know you can pick up and go like that.
Well, I suppose the tyres. Oh, I suppose you've got traction control. It's not too hard on the tyres.
No, they're Michelin Pilot Sport, so they're designed for it anyway.
And I guess the power's through all 4 wheels.
Yes, yeah, it's 4-wheel drive.
If we can, as we drive along, Peter, I can just ask you. One thing I was a little bit confused about, and I'm easily confused, is that I noticed there's several different types of charging points for electric vehicles. What are the differences?
The differences are, well, the standard one is AC charging, which is called the Type 2, and that's pretty universal. So every single car can take a Type 2 connector. Every single electric vehicle out there is perfectly happy to run on those, so that's to the good. When it does become confusing is there's 2 opposing types of DC charging, which is the rapid charging. While they're much faster, you have to make sure that you have the right one for your particular car. So you have the CCS, which is a development of the Type 2 connector, which is one kind of DC rapid charging, and you also get the CHAdeMO, which is another form of rapid charger, which tends to be certain specific models. So perhaps Nissan's, Mitsubishi, a few others utilise that CHAdeMO one. Generally, the CCS charger is becoming the dominant form of rapid charging, and CHAdeMO is sort of becoming a smaller and smaller percentage of the UK market for rapid charging. So so that situation is sorting itself out at the moment, and it's just worth bearing in mind if you are looking at an electric car. Probably CCS is going to be the best form to go for.
So it's really easy to get out of the ice.
Yeah.
So Peter, how do you pay for using these external chargers? Do you need a specific card, or will a credit card or debit card, phone, Apple Pay? How does it all work?
Well, basically, to start with, there was a number of different ways of paying. That you had to have a specific access card, or maybe a key fob,
Yeah.
or maybe download a specific app for a particular charging network.
Yeah.
And what's actually happened is the government has passed legislation that means all rapid chargers have to have the ability to pay using a contactless payment, so they're open access. Generally, the AC fast charging networks have lagged behind on that, but what we're doing with a thing called Plug-in Suffolk is we're addressing that. So Plug-in Suffolk was Team Suffolk leading the way, the first in the UK county-wide open access fast charging network, and they're rolling out all across the county. So if you come to Suffolk as a tourist, or if you're just out and about wanting to charge your car, find a Plug-in Suffolk socket and you can just pay using your contactless payment. There's no need to pre-book or anything.
Lovely, thank you.
Yeah, I've got a question actually came from one of our colleagues that Holly and I work with. He lives in a mid-terraced house. In fact, he hasn't got a car at the moment. He'd like to go electric. Any advice for somebody who can't actually take their car onto their driveway?
Yes, I know a number of people who are in that particular situation, and I think back when electric cars only had a range of about 80 miles, that was a real concern because you really wanted to be charging it every night. Now that cars are more looking at maybe 200 to 300 miles range, well, that's a week or maybe 2 weeks commuting for a lot of people. So it's less of a pressing issue. And what the people, I know a few people in that particular situation, what they tend to do is they charge up while they're out and about. So while it's outside their house, that's not when the car is charging. So if they're going to the supermarket, there's a lot of free charging available at supermarkets. And if they're at work, you can sometimes get charged there. There's various options, and that's what they do. So as I say, it used to be a problem, and it's more of a psychological problem rather than a physical problem now, because it's perfectly possible to overcome it.
I must say I've noticed the charges have gone in at my local Tesco's, which is only a short walk from me.
Yes, and if you're shopping at Tesco's, there's probably a lower rate or even free, a lot of them. I know I charged up at a little while ago, and that was free.
Ah, excellent. But if I am sold, I wanted to get an electric vehicle now. How do I go about getting an electric charger at home? And are there still any discounts available to have them put in?
Yes, at the moment there is a grant from the government. If you get an electric vehicle, you can get a grant towards the installation of your home charging point. But that is, and it's something that a lot of people don't actually realise, that is actually going to end in April of 2022. So if you are thinking, again, just to reiterate what I said before, if you are thinking of switching to electric, now is actually quite a good time to do it.
Right, I'm going to have to get my skates on then. Thanks very much.
Yeah, it's a really good stereo system, which you can actually play outside. That's playing outside the car as well. So if you're stopped having a picnic somewhere, you can play the music quietly to yourself. You also have other things like this.
So if you've got young children, then have that.
All that hard work they put into the stereo system,
Yes.
it's all well placed for that kind of thing. So you have all that kind of thing. You can write things. So
Yeah, I definitely can't do this in my BMW for sure.
And there's quite a lot of manufacturers now into electric vehicles. Can you see anything new and exciting in the next 2 or 3 years, Peter?
Yes, there's a lot of things coming down the tracks. One particular one that springs to my mind is inductive charging. So we were just talking about the different kinds of charging connector, but eventually you're going to have a thing called autonomous taxis, which is vehicles that drive themselves. And obviously they're not going to have someone to plug them in when they need to be recharged. So what they'll do is they'll pull over a pad on the ground and stop. And while they're parked, in a similar way to you inductively or wirelessly charging your phone, they'll be recharging that way. The only thing I would say is it's not going to replace the other methods of charging. The Type 2 connector that we're rolling out with plug-in stuff will still be usable on those cars. It will just be an additional thing underneath the car that can pick up the wireless charging. So and that's I could see that moving into privately owned vehicles, not just taxis. So that'll be an interesting thing coming down the road. The autonomous taxis I also just mentioned as well. So you're literally going to have the ability to call up a vehicle which will drive itself to your house, pick you up, take you to a destination, drop you off, and then go off and charge itself up or do something else. And then when you want to get back home again, you do the same thing again, and you get another vehicle come and pick you up and drop you off, and there's no driver involved. And having experienced things like Tesla Autopilot, I'm starting to come around to the fact that it's only a matter of time before that technology is up to the standard where it's as safe, if not safer, than a human being driving. So that's not far away. And the other thing that's really also really interests me is a thing called vehicle to grid. So obviously in an electric car you have a really large battery, and that battery can be used to power the car along, of course, but over the course of a day a house will use somewhere between 10 and 20 kilowatt hours to power itself. So whether you get that from the mains, whether you get it from solar panels on the roof or whatever. So with a car, you've got a massive store of several days of the ability to power your house, and I do believe that that ability to feed power not just from the house into the car to charge it up, but also say at very high cost times, say at peak time in the evening around 6 o'clock when everyone's cooking their dinner, the cost of electricity shoots right up, and you're paying for that when you're using the mains. So I could see the day coming where people use their car to move the time when they're spending money on their electricity, and so they get it always at the cheapest rate. So vehicle to grid is coming. Several cars on the market already. I mentioned one from Hyundai, another one from Kia. Actually, you can plug in a 3-pin socket and actually boil a kettle or something from the car. So these technologies are coming along, and I think in a very short space of time they're going to be better known than at the moment, where they're pretty much unheard of.
Yeah.
So no longer will I have the sound of the washing machine in the middle of the night as it turns away.
No, you might end up with it being powered by your car.
So Peter, I've heard a lot of people saying that the batteries need to be changed after so many years and that they're going to landfill. What is the truth behind all of that?
Well, that's quite interesting. It's quite a common misconception that they need to be replaced and taken out of the car and thrown away after a few years. What's actually happening is we're finding that batteries in electric cars are lasting much longer than originally thought, and once they're finished in the car, say after 10 to 15 years, maybe 20 years in the car, they're showing signs of being perfectly capable of lasting that long. But once they've finished in the car, they're not taken out and thrown away. They're removed and actually used for something else, because the usage pattern in a car is very different compared to a usage pattern, say, at a house or at a power station. So what they do is they take the battery packs apart and use the cells for what's called second life purpose. So second life is static battery storage, where the charging up and discharging a pattern is much smoother, and that way they'll last another 15 or 20 years in that, and so you get a lot of use out of the batteries. And even in that situation, at the end of that period of time, whether that's 30 or 40 years, you don't just throw them away into landfill. There's a lot of very easily reusable materials inside batteries. So what they do is they take them apart and recycle them. So a lot of it can be used. A lot of the very rare materials that are used in it, such as cobalt, which has caused a lot of questions to be asked about the environmental friendliness of batteries. The newer kinds of batteries actually don't have any cobalt in them. So they're lithium iron phosphate batteries, so there's no cobalt in those. So that's removing that. That's removing that argument against them. But at the end of their lives, the battery can be recycled. And I always think, good luck recycling a gallon of petrol once you've burnt it. So that's the big difference between the battery power and internal combustion engines.
So when you say second life, what can they be used in everyday life, the batteries?
Yes, what we're finding is the interest, and we do a thing in our county called Solar Together Suffolk, which is a group buying scheme to help people be able to afford solar panels on their roof of their domestic house. And so we're going through another one of those, but this time we're also offering the option of tying those solar panels in with static storage. So say in the garage or in the loft you have a battery storage, so while you're not at home and the sun is shining on your roof and you can get all of the power out of your solar panels, that's charging up a battery, so when you then get home in the evening you can use some of that power and just time shift when you use that power.
Fantastic, thank you. So for people buying a second-hand electric vehicle, how does the whole charging system at your home work? Do you have to pay to get it installed yourself, or does a dealer come out and do it?
A lot of the time, if you're talking to a dealer as part of the actual agreement between you, you can very often get help towards having the home charge point fitted. A lot of the second-hand electric vehicles as well, you can just plug them into the mains. So a lot of people don't realise that an electric car, whilst it's faster to use a specific socket for it, that's not the only way of charging it. You can still simply plug them into a 3-pin socket overnight, and most people, that then tops the battery up enough to make it usable for the next day. So it's perfectly possible just to get an electric vehicle and start using it straight away. Simply plug it into the 3-pin. If you've got an outside 3-pin socket, you can get started. But the cost of the electric charge points, they're not excessively dear anyway. And the way I always looked on it, whenever I paid for one at my house, I'm adding to the value of the house. I'm future-proofing the house. The next people who move into my house when I finish with it, they're probably going to have an electric vehicle or want the ability to charge one. So that's it's money invested in your house rather than just money spent.
I've seen a lot on social media recently of housing plans that are developing for new builds, and they all have electric charging points being built onto the side of the houses. Yes,
and that's definitely the best way forwards, because it's so much better value to put it in when you're building the house rather than having to tack it on the side afterwards.
I think it's just a case of making it as easy for people as possible to get one. I think that it takes away a lot of the obstacles, is to already have it there.
Yes, and what I've found speaking to people who take up electric vehicles is the obstacles, once they get the electric vehicles, the obstacles are much less than they thought. They're not so important, but the benefits that they thought about before they got the electric vehicles, those benefits turn out to be much better than they thought. So it's a positive thing on both ways.